Bay of Izmit. The institutional part of this has started 2023, and this is a huge project which has been done with the cooperation of the municipality. So it has the Bay of Izmit has a very high importance in the Marmara Sea, and it's also environmentally should be protected. And with the cooperation Kartepe, we will talk about the Bay of Izmit, which is one of the most important parts of the Marmara Sea, and we will talk about the project for the prevention of the deep sludge. We have Gamze Tolun, Professor Gamze Tolun from TÜBİTAK Marmara Research Group, and she's the deputy chief of the biodiversity, and Melek Okyar, and from the Istanbul University we have Kağan Özdemir. So we have academics here, and for the complementary perspective, I would like to give the first word to Leyla Hanım. You have the first word. You have 15 to 20 minutes. I would like to welcome you as well. So let's start right ahead. I would like to talk about a project for the dredging of the seabed. This has been supported by the TÜBİTAK after 2007, and this project we implemented between 2013 and 16. So at the starting point of this project, we see that in bays and ports there is a seabed mud which accumulates there, and this leads to unwanted results, and this has to be from time to time be dredged. So this dredging is only one part of this problem, because you have to also transfer this mud and put it in a landfill. So during these activities, there are negative impacts on the ecosystem. The graphic you see up ahead shows you the increase of activities of dredging in Turkey, and in the shores of Turkey we have a large number of ports, and there we are doing dredgings, and this material is unearthed. So when we started in 2013 with this project, we didn't have a national legislation. So we used international agreements, which Turkey was a signatory of, and we have to commit to these agreements, international agreements. So we see that we have a pollution of the seabed, and how do we clean that, and how can we find some legislation or some method to implement this. And these activities are represented here in this picture. This is a dredging vessel with an excavator, and during this activity, these sedimented mud is a layer which has been produced by human beings, and during there is effects like chemical, biological, and physical effects on the sea during the dredging. So, thinking about these effects, we found out principles to prevent this, and this was our approach. And these principles are implemented in different areas, and this has been put into the legislation which has been approved nowadays. So this project had different goals. Firstly, the discharge of this dredged materials. What are the criteria for the dredged materials? Let's have a short break. Yes, the president's here. Welcome. So this material which has been dredged was looked for certain areas where this can be deposited on the Mediterranean, the Aegean, or the Black Sea. And of course, you have to register this. We need a registration system, and we also need a system to support these decisions here. And we also needed some principles how to monitor these areas, and we would also look for alternative methods for dredging, and what should be done with this substance which was dredged out. So building a decision tree was to be built, and we should look for positive implementations. We did this project with 3 partners, with the Metropolitan Institute and the ITÜ University, and with TÜBİTAK MAM. So it had to have a multidisciplinary structure. So it has to be taken regards the physical part of the seas and the marine biology, marine chemistry, and geology and geochemistry. And we also worked with different state institutions. So the work packages are very complicated. They have different interactions, so I will go over this. So we tested this project on 16 pilot areas, and these were in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea, in the Aegean, and in the Marmara Sea. So some of these areas are known for their fisheries, some are industrial regions, some are touristic regions. So we see different types of pollutions in these 16 different pilot areas. We should all first decide how this management should be regulated. So what are the EU directives inclusive, what kind of laws should be applied here. So we used also international publications, like the one of the discharge protocol of the international protocol, and there's also the London Protocol for the discharge of materials into the sea. So we needed, of course, a lot of informations. These informations were collected from the ministries, and also the output from projects we did before were used for information and data, and we made an evaluation of the inventory, and we did also field work, and the information which was collected here has been put together in a database. And part of the studies were tested after the ecotoxicity to find out what the environmental impact will be. And you see where we collect all this data, and we did this for all 4 seas of Turkey. Yes, these are the vessels we used, the analyses we did. So we took around 500 sediments samples and carrot samples, These, you can see the main results here. So we developed a methodology. What is the minimum number of samples to be collected in a area? Because if you take too much samples, that's also an environmental pressure. And if you take less, then you have not enough data. So how can we do the characterization here? And we built a flow chart. And you see one on the right side. Okay, I will skip over this. The physical characterizations and the particle size, the inorganic pollutants, the organic pollutants. So we have past the PCPs and the pesticides. These are different type of pollutants and their analysis. We did also some carrot samples. These are important because after a certain while is a drilling core. But when you look from the lowest point to the highest point of this drilling core, you see that the pollution is getting more with time. So we wanted to find out what the pollution was before humankind. So we also saw in our pilot study which parts are more toxic than the other one. And then we did also a research on the situation of the animals and plants. And we found out a minimum and maximum levels. So for each parameter, we found out the limit values for the minimum and the maximum, and because when it was under the value, we need to have new studies. So we used different components, we talked with experts and used chemical results. So we have here the limit values in comparison with EU countries. And here we have another flowchart which shows us how we decide where we discharge. Is this a substance or is this mud which can be discharged into water, or should we take it to a landfill? So after we decided to discharge or to put it into landfill, what are the criteria to find out where to discharge and where to put it into a landfill? What should be the chemical and physical attributes of these areas? And we did this study or this criteria for all of our seas. And afterward, we had a CBS decision tree, and we made a model implementation, especially for the Marmara Sea. And we looked for a certain substance, how it distributes with the current flows. It was a contrast material, and we did also bathymetrical studies, and we found out where we can make a discharge for this mud, and we send it to the authorities, and so we identified 59 areas to be suited for discharge. After the identification of this discharge area, we find the criteria, and and how do we monitor this? We need an evaluation of the potential effects. So therefore we need hypotheses, and we had hypotheses, and we found out what are the parameters and indicators to be monitored, and with what frequency we should monitor this, and how to put this in a reporting system to have the data inventory. And this system is able to produce reports now. We have here a potential effect evaluation when we have a discharge here, for example, in the Marmara Sea. How does it distribute, or how does it disseminate in different levels of the sea? So we found out with this concept. physical, chemical, and biological indicators, for example, blurriness or murkiness, because it has an effect on photosynthesis, and the increase of phytoplanktons, because it is also a food for these microorganisms, and the protection of the seabed, and what type of negative effects the convective sedimentation has on this. We have all of this in detail in our report. So, and at the very least, at last, we have a information registration system, and after the discharge, this should be monitored via the system. I want to talk a little bit about Izmit and about the useful use of these, or the advantageous use of this material, like using that in road construction or use in concrete. And there are alternative studies, and there was also a pre-use, and what are the costs? What are the costs if we have a useful implementation of this mud, and also the cases in Europe and in Turkey for the attributes of the machine park which will be used. So at the end we have a national legislation, and you can read about it in the literature. We have a more detailed report on the Bay of Izmit. No, publication, not a report, let me correct that. And we have also international citation. So thank you very much. I don't want to try to keep me at the time. So, thank you, Ms. Leyla. Mr. President, I would like to welcome you too. We talked about the project for the seabed mud is a project which has been supported by the state and by the municipalities. And as a person from Izmit, I am very interested in this project, and to be able to analyze this project with this distinguished guests like yourselves is very important for me. Yes, now I want to give the word to you, Mr. President. I want to give some suggestions. Maybe our experts here, our academics, should talk about this project, and I will talk at the end. That would be because the technical parts should be in their responsibility, because they have studies. Yes, and I will talk about at the end how we manage this, if that's okay. Yes, okay. So Melek Hoca, you have the word, please.
Thank you very much, and also welcome to our distinguished director. I had a presentation to share with you. I worked on the impact of the seabed mud discharge and disposal project on sea organisms, together with the General Directorate for Marine Affairs, in collaboration with the Municipality of Izmit. I'm also from Izmit, by the way. This is something I would like to underscore. And my childhood was spent in the following fashion. Whenever we left the city, went some other place, and came back to Izmit, we would be welcomed by the smell of Izmit, with which we understood that we had finally arrived in Izmit. But this is no longer the case. the Gulf of Izmir does no longer stink, neither smell. So congratulations to the successful effort of the municipality of Izmit. Izmit and the Gulf of Izmit is very dear to our heart. It's similar to the entirety of the Marmara Sea. It is approximately 50 kilometers long. The coastline expands to 129 kilometers, a total of 310 square kilometers of surface area. And we have the waters of the Black Sea on the surface, and the waters of the Mediterranean on in the deeper layers, and we can divide it into three main areas, and the most problematic and challenging one is the one further east, farthest east. We have different settlements here. We have the army, the navy, we have different harbors, we have different habitations, and also the Gulf of Izmir is prone to different challenges and problems, just like any other sea basically in the world, and it tries to survive basically. So eutrophication and other pressures applied by different pollutants lead to organic substance accumulation and the sedimentation of them. On top we have industrial waste material, and over time they sink and create a mud or a sludge on the seabed. And with eastern winds, these muds create turbidity and also unpleasant smells, both vertically and also horizontally when they mix with other organisms. And they can also result in mucilage and other consequences. They are the main trigger of mucilage. And if you have an increase of bacterial activity in the mud, you have dissolved organic material and therefore a decrease in oxygen that's dissolved, less light, and we have an increase in organisms that consume large amounts of oxygen, and that leads to an increase in bacterial populations. So we embarked on this project first in 2007 when the first mucilage incident happened. We had another one in a couple of years after that, and the most famous one in 2021, as you know. And with a decree by the presidency, our area was declared a marine protected area by the presidency, as I've said. And following that, we have seen the formation of very important initiatives and projects. And one of the most important ones is the seabed mud dredging, aerification and disposal project for the eastern basin of the Gulf of Izmit, which is a joint effort by the Ministry of the Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change with the municipality, the greater municipality of Kocaeli. This project is very important, especially pertaining to biodiversity. So the richer of biodiversity you have, the more ways of mitigation of the negative impacts of environmental pollutants and climate change and so on and so forth you have. We have lots of data accumulated and aggregated. We have been monitoring the Gulf of Izmit very closely for a long time. So we have insight into the initial baseline situation and also further developments. This was the basic question that we asked ourselves, and we started sampling in February, together with the Marine Institute at Istanbul University, and we've visited the area every month ever since, and we sampled. We sampled bacteria, chlorophyll, seawater, fish, zooplankton, and so on and so forth, and we want to gain insight into the changes. The temperature, yes, there is a decrease, just like in the Black Sea. The surface water temperature shows features of the Black Sea waters. Salinity in the deeper layers is less. So it's not really Mediterranean water properties that we see in terms of salinity in the Gulf. So Med waters is important, of course, because it enters the Marmara Sea on deeper layers through the Dardanelles, and it enriches the water with oxygen. But of course, the water entering from the Dardanelles loses its oxygen content for the most part halfway through. But that's another story. Oxygen structure very low, as you have seen on the previous slide. So let's look at water pollution. According to the directive of water pollution controls, we see that the quality of the water are of second, third, and fourth quality dimensions. So this means for a layman, this is polluted. But we do hope that these data will improve. Let's take a look at heterotrophic aerobic bacteria levels. These are the decomposing bacteria. The levels turned out as expected, but the total fecal coliform and intestinal streptococcus levels, which are pathogens, they are above the upper limit of the range, of the reference range. Escherichia coli, Pseudomonastria are dominant. Chlorophyll A, important for primary production, especially in spring terms. February, March, April quite high. Towards summer months they decrease. Let's take a look at the composition. Phytoplankton is important for primary production. They are important for the diversity, but also important for mucilage formation. As you can see on the pie chart here, Dinophycae is dominant as a species and important for mucilage formation, as are the other species that you can see here on the pie chart. A total of 69 species were recorded, and this is the breakdown according to stations and seasons. As I've said, Dinophyces are dominant, and Goniolac flagellis is the main one within that group, and it led to the impression that new forms of mucilage could be formed again. In May 23, the Gulf of Izmit turned turquoise, stemming from a population of Emiliana huxley. Not very problematic, it just leads to a change in color of the water. So after this change of color towards turquoise, fisheries increase, fishing activities increase, so this was the effect after that. Zooplankton composition and intensity they show short life cycles, and they can not really adapt quickly to their environments. Therefore, they are important indicator species, and they are primary consumers of phytoplankton. So whenever there is an increase in phytoplankton, zooplanktons, they suppress them. A total of 34 species were identified, and the main Copepoda classification is made up mainly of these species, and the largest levels were recorded in the month of February. So if we take a look at the entire samples, we see that Noctiluca scintillans turned out to be highest in our samples, which are particularly important because of their heterotrophic feeding properties. What does that mean? They feed on carnivores, not on plants, but on carnivores or on other living species. They feed on the larvae of copepods, and they can create pressure on other species as well. This is important for the distribution of different organisms and different species. Other than that, Polyphymodes, polycat larvae, and bivalvia larvae are all dominant species, and Aureata are important features that we came across in our sampling. And we see large populations of jellyfish. They are important because when they decompose, they they trigger rather bacterial activity. Grabbing samples were important. Unfortunately, the seabed samples show this situation. A total of 17 species were identified, most of them dead, not alive. Only a couple of sea worms were alive, and another foreign invasive species was found to be alive. And it is prone to have invasive effects and impacts on the Gulf of Izmit. In the biodiversity activities, we used Algarna samples. 4 fish, 2 crustacea, 6 mollusca, very few species, unfortunately. Algarna samplings are also dominated by Aurelia aurita. Other than that, we had mussels and sea stars as well. So, in conclusion, what can we say? Coliform and fecal coliform levels have increased in comparison to previous studies in previous years. Recorded phytoplankton species are prone to rapid increase. They have that potential. This picture is from the month of February. There is limited water circulation, and we found a dominance of jellyfish in our studies. We have a pollution indicative populations and also invasive species. A total of 23 species were identified and 4 fish species. But this is the eastern part of our area. We are in the farthest eastern part of the Gulf. But what we can say, this shows the resistance of the Gulf of Izmit, the fact that we found these species. It needs to be supported, however. This is very important as a Gulf also for fisheries. So mud sampling is important in my personal humble opinion. It will further improve water quality. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for these important conclusions that you draw from a large data set. And this is a long-term project valid until 2026, and we will see further analyses of even more data. Distinguished participants, the Q&A session will be at the end. In order to make the best use of our time allocated, I would now give the floor to you. Welcome to all of you. I represent a team of 10. Let me preface everything I have to say by saying this. It includes different areas of specialization such as geophysics, geoengineering, mining engineering, mineral engineering, and other disciplines, so I represent a team of 10. In 2020, in the month of July, you may remember from the news, we had a serious incidence of mucilage in the Sea of Marmara. And the Sea of Marmara and its situation were outlined in detail by other speakers, but it created another dimension of awareness within the larger public. And it ignited further research and other studies. And we have found out about different ongoing studies in the region, in the area, because of this latest incidence of mucilage that we had in the Sea of Marmara. And together with the greater municipality of Kocaeli, with the mayor and his team, we collaborated and brainstormed about different possibilities of working together and what can be done. And we decided later on to investigate the seabed mud situation as a first urgent step, together with other steps that need to be taken, stemming from other root causes. And thankfully they accepted to collaborate with our experienced team, and we embarked on a feasibility study initially. However, before we embarked on this feasibility, on our feasibility study, we had previously worked on the lake of Mogan in Ankara, again pertaining to the seabed mud situation and its analysis, which we had presented in the form of a proposal earlier to the greater municipality of Ankara, which gladly was accepted. And back then, we had an idea, of course, how dredging should be performed, but not in detail. And we, as the faculty of mining at the University of Istanbul, got together with the municipal team. We joined forces and adopted the responsibility of project coordination as well, from start to finish. That was our role in that project. And we involved different academics from different disciplines yet again, and the project provided insight and experience up until 2021. And then later on, together with the greater municipality of Izmit, we embarked on the feasibility study that I just mentioned. And I would like to briefly outline the content of this feasibility study. I have prepared a presentation because it involves marine biology and other areas which I'm not an expert in, so I'm not going to go into the detail. However, I would like to provide you with a summary. If you could open the presentation, please.
Pardon.
So for this feasibility study, we have to have a snapshot of the pollution and also the seabed mud. So we need a bathymetric map, and then we should have also water analysis and also the definition of the characterization of the seabed mud. These analyses started 2007, as far as back as 2007, from different scientists, but we started this again to make an confirmation. And for the mathematic analysis, we are making a sonar research, and we look at the sedimentation. So this sedimentation, we see the bathymetric picture, and from the surface sediment, we also took some samples of mud, and we analyzed it chemically. We look at the seawater and analyzed it, and also the rivers were also analyzed with some samples taken, so we can see what the influx of material into this Bay of Izmit is, and also the methodology which has been used from the TÜBİTAK. We try to stay close to this methodology, so we have also sustainable data. So we looked for arsenic, for copper, for nitrogen, phosphorus, of course, and the total organic carbon. These were the data which has been researched, and also we took some drill cores from the mud. And here we see some parameters and their results. These are the results of 6 different drill sites or sample sites. Nitrogen and phosphorus are dominant here, especially. And the eutrophication and unwanted nutrients in the water, especially domestic waste and industrial waste. These would lead to, together with the industry, so in the last 100 years, with the founding of the Republic, you may remember it from Mesut Bey's presentation, because we have an industrialization and an unplanned urbanization, so this leads to a accumulation of the pollution. So with this project, the Izmit municipality tries to decrease the effect of the pollution which has been accumulated here for the last 100 years through unplanned urbanization, industrialization. And certain parameters are monitored here, and we saw that this is there are adverse effects here, and especially the seabed mud, which is directly under the upper layer of sedimentation. And Leyla Hoca talked also about the higher you go in the drill core, the number or pollution or the concentration of pollutants is increasing. So in the project phase, this was important for us, because when you look at the picture, we see that the sedimentation is more than which was planned. But we made here a prioritization, and we focused on the first meters of seabed mud. That was our priority. Here you see the the samples from the rivers which feed into the Bay of Izmit. Let me just spool back very quick. Here, yellow and red is between first class and fourth class of seawater quality. So yellow and red means bad quality. So in all of the parameters, or in most of the parameters, we see that it exceeds the upper limit. So the cleaning of the seabed mud, we have also other projects or other studies which are feeding into the system. So we should also have an eye on that too, as well. And Melek Hoca said that they are making a benthic monitoring, and we had similar results in our project. And the flocculation of the mud, we started also preliminary work on this. And with this study, this is a hydraulically pressed mud which are held back by textiles in tubes, and these were the preliminary works for that. And here, this is a feasibility study, of course, we shouldn't forget that. And this study has been shown to the mayor and also the authorities in the Ministry of Environment and Urbanism. And directly after that, we started with an application project, and they wanted more detailed information. So that's why we did a more detailed study with the equipment, what type of materials will be used there. So we made a detailed study and brought it to the project phase. And after the tender, we are still working on this, and we are still monitoring it. So we are giving here an advisory function here to the municipality as well as to the company who is working on this project. Well, in this short time, I can only give this much information. I'm sorry for that. Thank you. We are talking about the sea quality chemical analysis, or these sort of bacteria here. We talked about chemical and scientific parts, but as an academic myself, I think we should also talk about the awareness, or the raising of the awareness of the people who live in this area and work in this region. And there is another part of this data. And what would you like to say as a person who sits on the opposite side of the table? Thank you. I would like to thank also our academics for their presentation, not only for their presentation, but also for all of their efforts for this project. We decision makers have some disadvantages because you have to work in your day-to-day work, but there are also a lot of risks you are not confronted with. You know that they are there, but you are not confronted with that, and you have to care for your daily business. And that, therefore, we need studies which will pique our interest to these risks. And sometimes people say, oh, I know everything, but we do know one thing, that we don't know everything, and we know who to ask. And in the presentations just recently, maybe you saw it too, because Leyla Hoca talked about an interdisciplinary study. And so this shows us that no one discipline has all the data. So it has to be a multidisciplinary approach, and learn from the results. And the next time we are doing a project like this, you can learn from your mistakes and from your best practices. And this is the scientific method. You have effort, you have patients. And in TÜBİTAK, we have a monitoring study for years now, and our expert here talked about a very small part of it. So we're working for years on this. So the second part is we as decision makers make a decision, and this is a set of other decisions which haven't been taken. So when you make a decision, then you are forfeiting your right to other decisions, because when you say we want to clean the mud and we were investing $120 million here, so what do we forfeit then? We forfeit the construction of 400,000 buildings, or 400,000 apartments, or the 1-year budget of our infrastructure system for wastewater. So these are results, well, these are decisions which you don't see on your day-to-day lives because they're underground. So when you are making a decision to put your budget into a certain area, then you have to forfeit in other areas. When you look at from the presidential aspect or the presidential perspective, you see that we had an earthquake and 11 provinces were destroyed, and we need to make investments there. So let's take it a step further. With the analysis of the political rationale and the rationality of life, or the reality of life, or let me say short-term optimal decisions and long-term optimal decisions. And you see a paradox between these two. So what does it mean? The municipalities are usually elected for 5 years, and they work in these 5 years to be re-elected. And when they make decisions for re-elections, of course they have to think about the results of their decisions and their investments. So it's important for them to think more short term, so they prefer to invest more in projects which have an outcome for 5 years instead of project with an output of 15 years. Because, for example, when you have rain, you have flooding, of course you need infrastructure there. And if you don't do it, then you have a reaction from these people who live there, and you have that also on social media. And it stays on social media, and it comes back to the day of light again. So when you look at from a communication perspective, you have people who are not happy with what's happening in their region, and they're writing on social media, and you cannot delete it afterwards. So instead of working with these long-term projects, people tend to go for populism. So $150 million means 4 billion Turkish liras. So with this amount of money, you can have you can make better roads in the street or nicer sidewalks. These are small things which would make people happy, but these are short-term gains and short-term populist goals. And this is a Machiavellist approach. But you forget about your long-term goals. So you have the reality of the short-term benefit of the municipalities and the mayors, and the long-term benefit for the population who lives there. I come from the academy, so I look at goals in this perspective of short, mid, and long term, and look at the tense relationship between these goals. So in the east part of the Marmara Sea, we have the Bay of Izmit, and you saw all of these muds, and there is also heavy metals in this mud. So we have to drain these heavy metals because these go into the food chain and are consumed by the fish, especially mercury. When we think about the consumption of mussels, for example, this is a very risky process. So when the mud is still there, we are discussing nothing. So now we have the pictures. Yes. Here, this is the nozzle of the ship, and it cuts the mud. This is a sort of a cutter, a blade like a propeller, and these are pumped into this membrane filters. These are filters which have a capacity of around 1,000 tons. So we have a flocculation inside, and the mud is held back in this membrane. So we will see it about now. This is the mud. So we pump it out of the seabed. This was in the sea, but nobody saw it there. But when you take it out, all of a sudden you have the problem where to put it. And this is a part where the people who are responsible for communication should be very aware, because this could be used as a case study. In the screens of our smartphones, we have mercury. So where do we get rid of these screens and the mercury? And when you are planning to build a site for the collecting of this mercury, everybody starts to discuss it. Another problematic area is, unfortunately, because of political reasons, this case went to court to be stopped here, and the administrative court looks at this, and in which cases do we stop these work here? For example, when there's an archaeological site. So what happens when you are digging the mud and you are destroying the archaeological findings? These are cases where administrative courts should stop this project. But everybody knows, I'm sure everybody knows, that nothing of this sort will happen here, because we are not using excavators there, we're just using pumps. But the administrative court has to control this, has to study this, and this leads to a delay of the works we are trying to do. So the management of this system is another problem. So making this decision is a problem, because this is not a short-term goal, and I talked about the tension between the short-term reality and the long-term realities, and there is a tension, unfortunately. So this is a problematic case, and when you start to do it, then you have another problem. So in Kocaeli, in this area, we have 23 wastewater treatment plants for domestic waste, and 4.5 million cubic meters of domestic wastewater is dumped into the Marmara Sea in Izmit. And one of the main factors of support is domestic wastewater. We know this. The total discharge of 28% of the total discharge of domestic wastewater has been done in Izmit, and we don't have direct discharge without treatment. What is the case for the whole Marmara region? unfortunately, we see that 53% go with a pre-treatment. What is a pre-treatment of domestic wastewater? You collect them somewhere, and the large particles are collected, and the rest is dumped into the water. So we use the sea as a cesspool, so as a sinkhole. So the marine life feeds on this. And mucilage means this is a diarrhea. So this is the diarrhea of the sea. When you have diarrhea as a human being, you get rid of your waste. But as is in the sea, you can't get rid of these chemicals. And it kills the marine life. So cleaning up the mud was of utmost importance. And after we came to a point with this, all of the scientific data, and we saw that also in the first presentation, the presidency, we showed it to the presidency of the Republic, and it was held to the vote, and we took 1/3 of the budget. This was a huge sum for our municipality, but this is also 1/3 was paid by the ministry and 1/3 by the presidency. So we are sharing the load in that case. So I would like to thank the former Minister Murat Kurum and the current Minister, Mr. Özaseki. I would like to thank them and all of our experts, but we have an interdisciplinary work of our expert behind this, and this is a huge project, and I am proud to say that Turkey was able to continue with this project in these dire times is really important. And academically is very important because we are going to have new publications how to use this mud that will be dug out there. And I think this is an area where we should make more detailed studies, especially in the cement industry and in the construction of roads, for example. How can this material be used there? So the academic studies should be increased in number, and maybe dissertations should be done in this area or should be stimulated. And afterwards, nowadays we see that we have people who come here to look for their sea lines or their base, like the Gulf of Izmir is interested in our project, for example. So I think other areas will follow suit, and we will make a good example and will be a positive example. And if we have positive results, we will see that the amount of O2 will rise and the biological diversity will be on the increase.
Thank you very much, distinguished Mayor. It's a large-scale project with many stakeholders, and there are certain challenges attached to a project of this dimension. I believe that disinformation on social media is the biggest handicap and the biggest challenge everywhere. This is a challenge that we face also in the academia and the media and everywhere else. This is something that we've been working on together with communication specialists. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you to all the participants for carving out the time and listening so attentively. If you have a question, with your permission, I would now like to take a couple of them. Yes, please. Thank you very much for this presentation and for all these valuable field work. I have a question for you. Generally speaking, I've been observing that all the studies carried out, similar to the studies carried out in the 11 affected provinces by the earthquake, the first thing I thought that would have been drafted would have been an environmental plan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, that's really not the case. They immediately embarked on construction efforts. The data pertaining to climate crisis, they have surpassed expectations, and we are headed towards a very dangerous set of different possibilities, including war. So please correct me, as I've said, please inform me. We don't have an environmental impact plan, no action plan pertaining to Istanbul in particular, since 2009. And I would also like to come to the Princess Islands, because here we have yet again a lack of environmental plans, but construction plans instead. And lots of construction is ongoing. This is very dangerous, and it requires an interdisciplinary approach, as you've mentioned. This is a must. So how can we catapult the topic to the dimension of the environment? I think this question pertains more to my area of expertise. We do have we do have environmental plans on the scale of 1 to 25,000 in Istanbul, and also in those provinces that have been affected by the earthquake. So a slight correction: the available plans you may consider general, not detailed enough, but Marmara has been declared a sensitive zone, and there is no construction ongoing in Marmara because no decree was adopted by the Ministry of the Environment, Urban Planning and Climate Change, as of yet. However, because of issues revolving around authorization, there is a small clash between local authorities and the central administration. Well, you are also quite right. There is no specific detailed plan at hand. However, it's not true that scientists are not involved in the planning, because we have put together a team under the auspices and supervision of TÜBİTAK. Members of the team come from different backgrounds, different areas of specialization. They have come together via the call by TÜBİTAK. We have also been able to get some funding as well. So we're not doing too bad, especially when it comes to Marmara. Coming to the issue of treatment facilities, there we should do a better job, because when you take on nitrogen and phosphor, you have an advanced biological treatment. But I can say that 73% of our facilities are advanced ones. The rest are only biological treatment facilities. 53% of the total discharge in the region of Marmara is pre-treatment. Bursa is like us, and the other provinces are not like us. You can complete the rest of the sentence. The archaic thinking was we can do pre-treatment, and for the soluble or watery part we can do a deep discharge, and then it can dissolve in the Black Sea. That was the archaic thinking, but it came back in form of precipitation. So the long-term use of the sea as a sinkhole or as sewage is not possible and has been widely accepted by those that try to implement project ideas. We need to have treatment facilities, but when it comes to the budget, there we have constraints. We have 4 biological treatment facilities, and they are of small scale. They equal 27% I just mentioned. In order to turn them into advanced biological treatment facilities, I need 10 billion. So I need larger investment budgets. So any mayor, no mayor, is in a position to go to the Directorate General for Water Affairs and ask for this kind of money, especially when you take into consideration that we are in the pre-election phase. No mayor will invest in a project the fruits of which he can only yield in many years to come, especially if he's right before the elections. Otherwise, he will just be painting the sky pink for everyone else to get the votes. But we do need these investments, that's for sure. And unless we don't do them, we just keep on talking. We'll have mucilage, we'll have different professors on TV, on conferences, and so on and so forth. But other than that, we won't solve the problem. And this is only true until the mucilage is visible. Once the mucilage gets out of sight, nobody will talk about it any longer. Am I right? So I think it should be made very clear that the awareness pertaining to public awareness has to be increased. Pertaining to the earthquake, I do know that the Ministry of the Environment is working very intensively on this. The gentleman to your right, a little behind you, is heading the Chamber of Civil Engineers in Kocaeli, and 250 buildings, 85% of 250 buildings have been screened already, so they are doing a good job, and until January or the latest February we will have screened all of the buildings and then take our decisions. So we're not doing as badly as you would expect us to do, but there's still lots of ground to be covered, that's for sure. Yes, thank you very much. We have exceeded our time largely. Thank you very much for taking the time and being with us. Thank you to our panelists. I hope to see you in other sessions as well. Thank you.